Are you one of those people who wish that Bethesda would put Starfield to rest? That they'd put it in the bin, they'd move everything over to Elder Scrolls 6, and just accept Starfield, it didn't work out, it's time to try and get back to our best with the next Elder Scrolls game. Sadly, if you are one of those people, it doesn't sound like that's happening. It sounds like that Todd Howard, he's going all in on Starfield. He's doubling down, he's recommitting. It's going to be Starfield, Starfield, more Starfield for many, many years. And the evidence for this, so Mr. Matty Plays, a YouTuber who covers a lot of Bethesda stuff, he did a 1 hour plus interview with Todd Howard, and there wasn't a lot of new stuff on like the Elder Scrolls, Fallout, not really. But there was plenty of talk about Starfield, not just about Shattered Space, the upcoming expansion that many people, including myself, have sadly already paid for. If you bought the deluxe edition, you got this great expansion prepaid for, and it's meant to be coming later this year. I assume that's all it was going to be. We'd get that expansion. Bethesda would at least have some self-awareness. I'm sure there's some egos over there, but I assume they would go, the reception is middling. Just had a look at Steam, and mostly negative recent reviews because of the paid mods. Mixed in total. Pretty average. Even Fallout 76 isn't mostly positive now, so not looking very good for Starfield. Even still, they're still committing to that 10-year plan, it sounds like. Starfield, it's going to be the next Skyrim. People are going to be playing it for decades to come. They haven't moved on from that. They're still genuinely convinced that people are eventually going to find the fun. Just one more randomly generated planet dungeon you've seen for the 15th time because of procedural generation. Eventually, it's going to click and you're all going to start enjoying yourself. So there's going to be more expansions, not just Shattered Space. Apparently, every year, it's sounding like we're going to get a new story expansion. Now, I'm a little bit torn on that. I'll explain why. But to summarize the key parts of this interview, at least the parts that Todd Howard wanted to get out there, not some of the questionable things he said, which we'll get to. The main takeaways: Todd Howard just revealed Starfield story expansion information. Shattered Space will strictly take place on a new planet and city, so players can focus on fully exploring a new world. Yearly story expansions, so not just the one. Second story expansion is already planned. So this first part about Shattered Space taking place on a new planet and city, taking place on the one planet, the one location. That will obviously sound good to some people. The biggest flaw for many with Starfield is it totally strayed from Bethesda's strengths rather than focusing on exploration in one big map with towns, settlements, everything like that. Instead of going in that direction, they decided, hey, let's use our procedural generation tools to create 1,000 planets with barely anything in them, because that'd be realistic, because space is meant to be empty. That'll create the fun factor, won't it? So they made that decision, and it sounds like they're going back on that design philosophy. They're going back to just having one planet, one location with hopefully handcrafted little areas to explore. And that is a good thing. I had basically zero hype for Shattered Space. Even though some people like the look of the trailer, I sort of thought, yeah, I mean, that's fine. But if it is just going to be more randomly generated locations, I don't really care. So hearing this is probably the first time I thought, yeah, I'll probably play that through if it's going to be like, as Todd Howard described, more of a Far Harbor experience from Fallout 4, which is probably one of the better pieces of content for that whole game, including the base game. Far Harbor was pretty decent, even though I heard years later that they might have plagiarized it and stole it off a modder. Don't know if that's true, but I wouldn't put it past them, given I'm not sure how much talent they actually have these days. But the reason I'm torn, Shattered Space itself, it sounds like it could be alright, but I feel like, are we going to be getting this yearly story expansions? And is this going to slow down the progress of an Elder Scrolls 6? Because I truly believe that you can't really fix Starfield. They could add a story expansion for the next 10 years. You could get 10 of them, and they could all be decent. The base game will still suck, and there won't really be any saving Starfield from mediocrity. And maybe in 10 years we go, gee, remember that game? It started poorly, but every expansion was pretty good, pretty decent. That could end up happening, but I just don't see the point. And I say that because the core of Starfield is rotten. It's like they built a house on a swamp. it's slowly sinking. And it doesn't matter really what you bolt on, quality of life improvements with their little 6-week patches and all of that. You're never really going to fix the game. It's easier, I believe, to start from scratch than to keep trying to improve this. It's not a Cyberpunk situation. It didn't release with a decent core, a decent foundation, but it was a buggy mess and it took years to finish. That's not going to work here. Starfield is just fundamentally not very good, and I'll summarize it for the 18th time. Essentially what you've got, if I talk about the positives, is just some linear faction quest lines that are serviceable. Some are better than others. They're all right, but these are linear quest lines that you could put in any other RPG. Outside of that, the exploration, it is randomly generated with a very small number in the grand scheme of things, a small number of points of interest that get repetitive very quickly. And that's basically the whole game. The bits and pieces in between that, they're all just average. Like, you go to a city, there's barely any reaction from NPCs. The towns themselves, the settlements, they feel a bit half-baked, half-finished. And I do think Starfield was rushed. They had to fix Fallout 76. That took them years, and it had then been so long since they'd put out a single-player game that I think they were under some pressure to get something new out there, given the Elder Scrolls was sitting there waiting for a new entry, same with Fallout in the single-player space, so they got to work on getting Starfield out ASAP. It felt like it took ages, but it didn't really, just because of the disaster that was the initial release of Fallout 76. They probably only had 3-4 years on Starfield, which isn't long, sadly, in the AAA space. I still think it's too long, but these days, apparently, that's the industry standard. That's another conversation. But to try and keep it short and sweet, that's basically Starfield. It doesn't excel at anything, and there's nothing in its core foundation that is worth building on. It feels like, to me, more of an ego thing, like they don't want to drop Starfield, because it's their brand new IP, and it would be bad for the Bethesda brand as a whole if they walked away from it. And again, I get that with Cyberpunk, CD Projekt Red, they staked their reputation on it, they wanted to fix it. Maybe Bethesda want to do the same with Starfield. I just don't think it's worth it. You're going to be wasting your time, all these resources. You could be building story expansions in advance for the Elder Scrolls if you have a team for this. Or maybe there's a way to use the Starfield DLC team to help get Elder Scrolls 6 out faster. The point really is, spending these resources on Starfield, it's going to either slow down the base game of Elder Scrolls 6, or it's going to mean a longer wait for follow-up updates to that game. And I really think that most core Bethesda fans would just prefer you get Elder Scrolls 6 moving as fast as possible. Even though Todd Howard would probably say, no, it's different teams, nothing's slowing the Elder Scrolls down. I don't believe that putting further resources into Starfield won't affect the Elder Scrolls 6 in some way. And maybe Elder Scrolls 6, it turns out to be a classic. Bethesda learn from their mistakes and we get an absolute banger in the Elder Scrolls 6. Probably absolute cope, but there's a chance it could happen. And if it does, I would much prefer that there is content in the works for that game rather than it being wasted on Starfield. Starfield is the ugly duckling IP. No one really likes it. There are a core group of people who I think say that they love it, but these are just obsessive Bethesda fans. It doesn't matter what they release, whether it's Fallout 76, Starfield, anything Elder Scrolls related, they'll eat it up. And you can be guaranteed that if Elder Scrolls 6 came out tomorrow, all those Starfield fans, they'd move on immediately and they'd never bring up Starfield again. Most people praising the game, they can rarely tell you why. It's just they were hungry for a Bethesda title. Doesn't matter at all what it is. They would have just played anything. And that's all it is. People who were starved of Bethesda content because we hadn't had a single player game since Fallout 4. I don't think it excuses the mediocrity of Starfield, and I just prefer, even if it's going to be a long wait, that they try and put everything into Elder Scrolls 6. I see it as their last chance to get back to the top of the gaming sphere, because they've fallen down a few rungs. Kind of like BioWare with Anthem Andromeda. Bethesda have had that. Fallout 76 was kind of their Anthem at launch. Now, to be fair, They did fix some of it, and maybe they'll use that argument to say, we fixed Fallout 76, now at least some people like it, again, positive reviews on Steam, that's why we need to fix Starfield, we don't want to abandon it like Anthem, which was just an overall embarrassment. Again, I don't agree, because the difference with Fallout 76, it was still, I guess, that core modern Bethesda Fallout experience just online, whereas Starfield isn't really the core Bethesda experience in space. They changed it too much. They killed exploration. That was always their strength. If you don't have the good exploration, everything falls apart because their characters, their quest design, their RPG systems, they've never actually been that good. Their point of difference was the exploration. If you don't have that, you have to move on to the Elder Scrolls. It's not going to work. Doesn't matter how good the expansions are, they'll be bite-sized chunks. People want that full game, the great base game, before the DLC. So again, I just think that they should move on. Now, there were a few other things discussed in that interview, and someone here has taken out all of Todd's spin. And this is the honest version of some of what he said. So Todd tried to cope lie, saying the planets are so big to allow for many mods. Big mods. Now, the whole thing with mods is Creation Kit is out. All the creatives, they can get to work fixing Starfield. That's what we were told, that, oh, the modders, they're going to fix Starfield. They're going to turn it into a great game. What I'm really seeing is there are some decent mods that are aiming to fix balance and add some quality of life. That's all fine. Again, it's not going to fix the game. Foundation's rotten. You can't fix that. Quality of life won't suddenly make it fun. But what I see a lot of, things like this. Oh, you can play as Darth Vader. Or why don't we mod in all of the alien stuff? It's a space game, so let's bring in the Xenomorph. Let's bring in the Facehugger. That's fun. That's creative. Again, it's fine. It's a bit of fun, but how long does that fun last for? It's a novelty for like 30 minutes, and then you're bored. Then you're just stuck with Starfield again. If the idea of mods is just cosmetic stuff, it's cool, but I think everyone's going to lose interest. The modders will realize, I'm not getting as many downloads as with Skyrim, because, let's face it, not many people are playing Starfield in comparison. And the players, again, adding the Xenomorph doesn't make the game fun, so they'll move on. Some people have this idea that a couple of modders in their spare time are going to overhaul all the work that like 400 plus developers at Bethesda spent years and years working, that it's an easy fix to unfuck this game that has had all of these design problems. Now, to be fair, Bethesda probably has a lot of DEI hires these days that a couple of modders could probably outclass times 10. I'm not disputing that, but I don't think that they can fix this. They can add little things, but you're still going to be stuck with Starfield. You've got to face reality. But of course, we get the fanboys on the No Sodium Starfield, which is a Reddit community where you're not allowed to say anything negative. And in response to the interview, they say, bad news for all the Starfield doomers. Oh, I find it funny because they're acting like we're going to be upset if Starfield gets fixed and it actually somehow becomes good. Like, that's a bad thing. If Bethesda do that, great, I've got a fun game to play. I just don't think it's going to happen. I'm trying to live in reality, which is why I'm remaining negative. But this person thinks, oh, Bethesda will give you the middle finger if they make Starfield good. You're going to be sorry. Okay, then. And going back to some more of those points from the interview, Todd said that Shattered Space will take place only on one planet, and that isn't a response to criticism. It was decided early on. Now, some might call that out as yet another Todd lie, bullshit, the reception was bad, that's why you're changing. Maybe, but it's like, how are they going to add even more planets, more procedural generation? They probably weren't. It makes sense to me that it would be a story-focused expansion at one place, because there's a lot of that in Starfield. The faction quest lines, they're all pretty linear, so maybe that's true. Started blinking rapidly when trying to justify the Tracker Alliance quest, suggesting he was maybe uncomfortable or maybe even lying about the reasons for it. Now, the Tracker Alliance quest, I believe it was the $7 quest that you could pay for, the paid mods, the Creation Club. Kind of sneaky, because it's essentially a paid piece of DLC that they're charging $7 for. But they snuck it on the Creation Club, so it seems like a mod, not a microtransaction. Pretty shady. His justification basically told us nothing new. It was just like, we're listening, we'll try and do better next time. I don't think anyone was buying it. Monetizing mods might be a good idea to create incentive and draw in more talented creators. So they're falling into this where, rather than just being honest and saying, well, we want mods to be paid because we take half. That's the truth. Instead, they're making it all about, oh, we want to reward the modders. They deserve to be paid for their work. Don't you think so? Well, that kind of already existed through Patreon and PayPal and other ways to reward modders. I much prefer when it's not mandatory because everyone gets the opportunity. You can reward the modder. It means you know that it's being made for passion. And I feel like the modders who are doing great work are getting rewarded for them. And just thinking about it, if you release your mod on the Creation Club, way less people are obviously going to play it than if it's on Nexus or something for free, given it's behind that paywall. And that means there's less people following you as a modder, because everything you do is commercial, it costs money. People are going to source free alternatives, and maybe you're standing in the modding community, it gets forgotten, people move on. Seems like maybe a short-term gain for some of these creators, but really the motivation is just Bethesda wanting a cut of the money. That's really all it is. I doubt there's any long-term benefits, given there always is some sort of free alternative, at least on PC. And then the last point, the Elder Scrolls 6 will likely feature affix loot like in Fallout 76 and Starfield, essentially meaning randomized loot for the most part. And rather than getting into that system, I saw an example that just made it clear why this is kind of stupid. So if you're playing Starfield and you kill an enemy, and then you loot it, and it drops a legendary weapon, and you think, yes, I've got my big gun, now I can kill these bullet sponge enemies really easily, but then you die, and then you respawn right before you killed the mob that dropped this legendary gun. You re-kill that mob, but now he drops a white weapon, which is totally useless, and you think to yourself, I'm playing a game. This isn't very immersive. This same enemy I killed 10 seconds ago, he dropped the legendary, now he drops a white. This does not feel real. It feels stupid. And in Todd's mind, the game designers, this makes it interesting because, oh, every time you play, something different happens. Feels a bit stupid. I've never been a massive fan of this randomized loot. I much preferred Morrowind, for instance, where great items, weapons, you had to go out and find them because they were in hand-placed locations around the world, in specific dungeons and so on. Even if it was quests, missions, maybe some tough ones where you had to earn the best weapons in the game, I much prefer that than just dropping off random guards, and it's all totally randomized. But that was the essence of the Todd interview. That's all the details. Starfield is here to stay. 10 more years, strap in. It's going to be very exciting, I'm sure. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.